All right, so welcome to Trine Time Astrology, everyone. I'm James, and I'm here with Alex and Lars for our third episode. And today we're going to be discussing the full moon in Taurus, especially as it relates to the previous new moon in Libra, because the full moon is the culmination of the new moon event. So Lars, what do you think about this full moon?
Well, the things that I kind of mainly noticed.
Sorry, I can't help it. I don't know what's wrong.
We're in a goofy mood today for
Yeah,
some
we were just
reason.
like we were
It's
just laughing a
probably
lot. So there must be
yeah,
something jovial happening. Oh, Jupiter. There we go.
yeah,
Right.
Jupiter with the sun,
Yeah, man,
and
that's what it is.
we opposite the moon, and we'll just blame it on anything we please because that's what we do in astrology, isn't it? We just blame things on planets and signs or whatever. It seems like that sometimes, but I don't know. What I noticed about the chart was, I looked at a bunch of things and I looked at the nakshatra of the moon in Bharani, the Navamsha position of the moon in Aries, and maybe we can talk about those later. But what's really interesting is how Venus is so prominent in the chart. It's ruling, the moon, and it's in its own sign. It's in its own bound. It's opposite Uranus. It's making an appearance out of the rays of the sun, which is significant. And it's with Mars, and finally it is on the almost exact degree of the new moon that preceded it at the end of Libra there. So
Well, yeah,
big relationship stuff going on,
I'm
like
gonna actually share
instability
share the chart so that
in
way
relationship
everyone can see what
perhaps.
we're talking about. So, okay.
So yeah, that Venus to me, it's also Oriental, and I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff out. But the way I would read this in a chart, if it was a birth chart or a horary chart where Venus was significant, is this could lead to some instability in relationships, in a desire to kind of smooth over enmity or to counteract bad fortune through kind of Venusian ideals and values of being a peacemaker and things like that. But the energy is very it's very unstable. It's very new, and so it's very perhaps innocent at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, let's see, Alex. What are your thoughts about this lunar phase?
Well, like first of all, what we mentioned when we spoke about it a bit earlier, there really seems to be a strong Venusian theme to this full moon. Besides the fact that Venus is in Libra and the moon is happening in Venus's sign, right? There's also the theme of Venus and Mars being together, right? The masculine and the feminine
Hmm.
in the sign of balance. There's also the theme of the sun and the moon being opposite, as is always the case with the full moon. But what really is interesting, and if you would share that chart, meanwhile, the fact that uh, moon is in the decan of the moon itself, and sun is in the decan of the sun itself, while both of these planets are in the bounds of Mercury, and Mercury is together with the sun in Scorpio and with Jupiter. So uh, the first thing which came to mind earlier was the theme of relationships, right? It's Venus, it's a lot of Libra, there's Taurus, there's kind of a sensual energy to this full moon. But at the same time, there is also the theme of general partnership, general agreements, general balancing of agreements, friendships, communications, because there's a lot of Mercury involved. So anything that has to do with the previous new moon will come to a completion with this full moon through these themes, through the themes of Venus, of partnership, of collaboration, not necessarily romantic relationships, but I'm sure that many people will experience it in this area as well. Uh, but whatever are the issues that were kind of commencing with the previous new moon will get finalized through these energies. And keep in mind that uh, while we should look at the previous new moon, there is also a need to look at the new moon that happened in the same sign, which is Taurus, about 6 months ago. That's something I usually look at it, and it proves quite insightful. But about this new moon, it's interesting that, right, we have kind of the same positions for planets. We have the same Uranus aspect as well, which kind of hints that something really novel may be just around the corner in this period, right, in the completion of this fortnight. And of course, we have the almost exact aspect of not only Uranus but also Neptune, which I think is really interesting. I'm curious what you guys think about the Neptune trine and sextile to this full moon.
In general, I think that this full moon, like you were saying, is a lot about balance, because the sun and moon are both in their own decan, which is a 10 degree segments of each sign. And that being the case, it's very fascinating, because we see that both Mars and Venus are in Libra, the sign of balance. So I think that a lot of this has to do with balancing energies of like yin and yang, of that, the ability to act, and then the ability to react, or to kind of like move energy forward. But regardless of all that, I just think that it's really fascinating to see this idea of energy itself and how we handle energy. And I think that's partially the issue at hand here, is how we're handling power and also energy. So Scorpio is oftentimes connected to power or intense energy, and the sun is there. And then Taurus is like associated with our physical material security and our physical material like well-being, and what nourishes us in a material physical way. And so I think that with these placements, we're getting this idea of figuring out how the energy is working in our lives and how we can balance it better.
Okay, yeah, cool. Kind of what you were saying sort of inspired me to think more about the Taurus Scorpio axis, and how the moon is in Kamadruma yoga, which means it has no embodied planets in the sign before and after it. So it's a lonely moon. And there's such an emphasis on this, the Western hemisphere of this chart, because we're kind of using the moon as an ascendant. So there's almost like this theme emerging for me of like loneliness, and maybe feeling like lonely in responsibilities, attending to the basic needs like food and, managing wealth and resources, and sort of, the Neptune aspect being so perfect is like, it's such an avenue for escape, and it's such an avenue for just doing anything to like get away from potential loneliness. And perhaps some of that has to do with, trying to run toward partnerships or with other people, or just, kind of avenues of escape like that, especially with Neptune in the 11th from the moon. But with Venus opposite Uranus, I'm beginning to think, okay, there could be this type of theme where there's like, people may be able to experience insights into the nature of love, sex, and relationship that totally just blow their mind. And it could be through something more traumatic or intense, like something comes to light about a partnership or a romantic relationship that just makes you question everything. Or it could just be like sort of a divine kind of laughter bubbling over into your consciousness that allows you to see things in a different light. Obviously these themes are, not going to be relevant for every single person, but these are just some of the things that, at least as I see it, like this might be how I interpret it if it was a horary chart or something like that.
Right.
Well, I'm not usually the kind of astrologer that always goes into like looking for like relationship stuff and magical unicornish stuff, and you guys are not either. But this full moon really holds like this is an event where you do really speak about like fairy tale-ish love situations and sensuality like that. This, if I were to like make up an event in my mind, an astrological event, where I would say like this is the event where I would only focus on like relation or mostly focus on relationship themes and magical love scenarios, this would be it. This would be the one. Uh, so I do agree with everything you said, Lars, about this being a potential revealing of some romantic relationship, some soulmate relationship even. So this can be significant for a lot of people in that regard. Now, there's a lot of people out there just waiting to meet their soulmate, their twin flame, their whatever else, right? Don't get too excited about that in that way. But at the same time, if you do have relationship themes, important ones, unfolding in your life at this time, know that this aspect, this astrological event, is very likely to be quite significant. And again,
Right.
it's not only the funny, bubbly things, because we have to remember that if we take the moon as ascendant, we have Venus, the Lord, with Mars in the 6th house.
Yeah.
So this may also be a time where conflicts in relationships get resolved or amplified or brought to the surface and discussed, because remember, Mercury is very involved. So there is a lot of maybe socializing, communicating, agreeing upon things, kind of dissecting situations when it comes to relationships. And again, it's not only about romantic relationships, it can be about business partnerships as well. So I think on a world stage, on the economic level, in economy, there will be some things that will come to fruition as a result of this full moon. James,
Well,
what do you?
yeah, thank you. I think that also it's something to consider is like with Neptune, since it's so close to these aspects with a trine with the sun and then a sextile with the moon here, or rather the luminaries are close to aspecting Neptune, I should say. What I think about with Neptune is usually like illusions and delusions and ways in which we refuse to see the truth or are incapable of seeing the truth. It's like everything is in a haze or a fog. And so in the context of relationships, I think that a lot of times we get into these fantasies about how we think things will be or how we think people are so great and amazing. And then when reality hits, we're like, oh, wow, okay. So I had all these like fantastical expectations and none of that happened. And I think that part of it is kind of like this idea of dealing with our expectations and being more realistic about them, because that's been one of the big lessons of Saturn and Sagittarius is having realistic expectations and not being too ambitious with our idealism. And I guess I'm mentioning that because I think that a lot of the stuff with Neptune has to do with the truth, and are we seeing the truth? And are we able to really grasp hold of what's true and what's not? Because soon Mercury will square Neptune, and within not within long, So I just think it's something to keep remain cognizant of as we're thinking about these themes. But with Mars and Venus, Venus will not catch up with. Mars will not catch up with Venus here. Venus is actually going to be conjunct Jupiter soon. So Venus is escaping from Mars, I guess you would say, and going toward Jupiter and the Sun. And I see that as being really positive in that perhaps our relationships with others are going to take on a more intimate characteristic and a deeper emotional level, and get away from a lot of perhaps fighting or bickering or anger. Those are some random thoughts I wanted to throw out there. So what are you thinking, Lars?
Wow, I really like that last insight a lot, about, starting to get away from the conflict and stuff. And this kind of brings me back into Venus making some kind of an appearance, meaning it's rising out of the rays of the sun, having sort of, completed the mythological journey into the underworld. And so Venus reemerging is like a reappearance of the, the energies of the goddess, and the, that archetype, and the, sorry, I'm struggling for words here, but the, it's, again, it's just, yeah, it's some aspect of that, whether that's romance, pleasure, or kind of the more intimate side of what we might call spirituality, because Venus as the night benefic is like deals more with that more personal relationship we have to spirit, whereas Jupiter is the more impersonal. So those things are like re-emerging strongly in life, and because of the Uranus, there could be a sudden sort of element to it. And another really interesting thing I noticed, employing some Gemini techniques, Mercury is the Atmakaraka because it has the highest degree, so it's in the 7th from the moon. And Jupiter with the lowest degree is the Dadakaraka, which is the basically represents the spouse, and it's in the same sign as Mercury. And so it's a really, I think that's a unique situation where those two karakas are together in the same house. And it kind of makes me feel like what you said, Alex, about this being like a very powerful time for relationships, even possibly to the soulmate kind of level, could be a definite theme. And I guess I would sort of wonder if, because Jupiter's combust, he's hidden, right? So I wonder if this, for those of you who do experience a significant relationship during this time, or relationship theme, if it could be like that person is sort of like hidden, almost like it's like the person you least suspect. Anyway, just some thoughts.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea about like the idea of being hidden, and then just not expecting it, and then suddenly, oh wow, whoa, there it is. And so like with relationships, maybe even friendships, right?
Yeah.
And you've been friends with someone for a long time, and then suddenly it becomes some sort of like epic, romantic affair that's just like this fairy tale dream romance, and all you do is like eat chocolate and lie in bed together. Anyway, I don't want to get too steamy in here, right? But so
But
Alex,
yeah, right. Like this is kind of the energy of this full moon. It
I
is
know it
really
is.
a fuzzy, like rose goldish energy to
Yeah,
it, right?
right.
And
It's so
there's
romantic.
there's the full moon, like sun governed in Decan by the sun, moon governed in Decan by the moon, Mercury and Jupiter in the same sign, as Lars mentioned, representing one the soul, the other representing the spouse. Then there's Venus and Mars together, the masculine and the feminine, in the sign of the balance of the relationship in Libra. So all of this kind of points to partnerships coming to the surface. And I really love the idea of something hidden, which we might not have expected, especially with Neptune and Uranus really factoring in. I don't often look at the outer planets as it is typically done, but this time I have to admit that these planets, I do expect them to play a huge role in this full moon. And of course, it's the energy of Taurus. I mean, the moon is exalted in Taurus, right? It's exalted in the first 3 degrees of Taurus, but then it's considered, at least in Vedic astrology, it's considered in its root in the rest of Taurus. So there's really no better place for the moon to be, and there's nothing really hurting the moon. Opposite the moon, there's Mercury and there's Jupiter. That's absolutely fantastic. The ruler of the moon is Venus, own home, right? The only planet which is a bit inhibited here is Mars. But with all of this like Venusian essence around, I think Mars is kind of like stepping back and kind of, putting his sword, his gun down, and kind of, lavishing in the comfort and the pleasure of Venus for this time. I don't see it like, in a way, Mars is a bit like, it would usually be a bit frustrated in this situation in Libra with Venus and all of this feminine energy around. But I think in this scenario, Mars is just getting comfortable for a while, because then he'll have to go into Scorpio and help fight the dragon, like we spoke in the last video about Jupiter transiting Scorpio. And by the way, guys, if you haven't, you should check that video out as well. Link will be in the description. We're still in the phase of course, we're still in the phase of Jupiter transiting Scorpio, which is very significant for this full moon as well, since it's also in the opposite sign. So really interesting astrological event. I hadn't really looked at it in depth before coming out to speak with you guys about it. And as we started to unravel what it actually is, it just became this really interesting astrological event, and I didn't really expect that. I just saw that, okay, it's here, it's kind of on this degree with these planets. Oh, it's interesting that Jupiter and Mercury are opposite, right? That lends a good energy to. So I was just expecting it to be a really cool full moon in my ascendant sign, by the way. But this is really a profound astrological event, I think. And regardless of if you have relationship themes unfolding in your life or not, it will also depend on your natal placements and your houses. Again, this could be business, economy, things like that as well.
Right.
But this is really an energy to tap into. That would be my kind of my final note. Whatever is going on in your life, obviously this is like we're just shooting this 2 days before the actual event. But whatever is going on in your chart, don't expect anything. Just tap into this energy. If you are aware of the energies that are around, of your own vibe, of what's surrounding you, just tap in at the moment of this full moon. I think it will be worth your while to spend at least 10-20 minutes meditating on this energy. And then it's not like with the new moon, don't isolate yourself in meditation. Meditate and then go out and do something with that energy.
Right.
Go and interact with people, because it's Libra, it's Venus, it's Mercury. Like Mercury controls a lot of territory, so to say, controls a lot, pulls a lot of strings in this astrological event, and it is
Right.
the Atmakataka as well. So go out and socialize, communicate, mingle, have fun, be friendly, be humorous. This energy is just a wonderful energy to tap into.
Right.
That's what
Well, thanks so much for sharing all of that with us. And I think that, you know, I think that, like you were saying, it is relevant or it is important to keep into context, like each sign and how the signs might be experiencing these different energies. But I agree with you that this is a really interesting lunar event, in that there are a lot of connections to things that we've been seeing in the world, and the further unraveling of all this like sexual stuff, like in Hollywood in the US. So we're just seeing a lot of things coming to light with relationships and how we relate to others and the exchange of energy. So anyway, so let's see. Lars, we're probably getting to the end of the video today. So Lars, do you have any final thoughts about this moon?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I wanted to just briefly mention again that the moon's in the nakshatra Bharani, which has to do with birth and death. And the traditional symbol is the yoni, the Vesica Pisces, and that's the gate of life. And it's kind of it's an interesting reminder of how Divine Mother, Parashakti, and all that is the creator of the cosmos, and rules over our birth and death and everything in between. And so she's really the one guiding us, caretaking us, punishing us when we need punishing, all that stuff. And so with the moon being Kamadruma in Bharani, it again brings me back to kind of like this, some degree of loneliness that could be floating around, and this sense of pondering our mortality and, the place of sex in life and what that all has to deal with. And in concordance with that, the last planet, which we, I don't think we really touched on it. The Saturn in the 8th house from the moon is very fascinating because it's, it could represent to a certain degree, confronting fears related to things like loneliness and trauma and that sort of thing. Saturn, is kind of synonymous with the 8th in many ways. He traditionally is associated with death and mortality and traumas and things like that. So I feel like that Saturn in the 8th, along with the moon in Bharani, is kind of an important sub-theme for this this full moon. And so I guess those are my thoughts about it for now. Yeah.
Right. And I guess like some of my final thoughts would be kind of playing off what you said about Saturn, in that people with a lot of mutable energy with experiencing Saturn in Sagittarius, they've been experiencing aspects from Saturn. And so mutable people like sun, moon, rising, mutable signs have been dealing with issues surrounding fear, isolation, loneliness, depression, some feeling like really like there's a dark cloud. And that's something I've observed, discussing with people I know and then also in my own life. And I just wanted to emphasize that, you're not alone in that, because there's so many people who are really experiencing that feeling, but it's just a feeling. And I think that's how Neptune kind of plays into this too, is that our fears are illusions. We just don't always realize how they are. And soon Saturn is moving into Capricorn. So those people with cardinal placements will be kind of facing their fears and dealing with Saturn issues. And anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there about Saturn real quick. And that's pretty much all I've got to say about it. So I think that we have covered quite a lot in a short amount of time. So I hope that everyone has enjoyed this episode about the lunar event. And we will have a new video out soon, this coming, I guess, next week. So thank you all for joining us. And I hope that you will watch some of our final videos, some of our previous videos, and see, everything's so silly today. It must be like Neptune is like laughing gas. Is that what this is? I don't know.
Maybe that's a good Neptune.
Is that what it is?
Neptune thing.
Right. It's like.
But anyway, guys, subscribe to this YouTube channel. There's more cool videos, on even more serious videos than this one. And on my final note about this Taurus full moon, just get out there and feel it. Like, if you feel something in your heart, go with that feeling. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You must do that right now, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks, James. Thanks, Lars.
Okay, thank you. Okay.